Hello everyone, this is Stuart Tan. Welcome back to the Aurora Live channel. Today we'll talk about the 5 dimensions of energy. Now I know a lot of people have talked about productivity as a time management thing, but in reality it's not about time we need to manage. We need to manage our own internal states, our own internal energy. Hasn't there been a time in your life where you sat down and you were in a rush, but because you somehow tuned yourself into such a laser sharp focus, all of a sudden you got things done in like a fraction of the time? I know I've done that before and it totally freaks me out. So when I went to do the research, I realized that there are elements of brainwave states. You can get into an optimal brainwave state, and we'll talk about brainwaves in some other video. We also have the ability to get into an emotional flow state. Now this is something from Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who wrote about the state of flow so many years ago. And it still fascinates me to be able to concentrate so well that it becomes so habitual to get into a highly productive state. You knock out those documents so easily. You establish protocols and systems very well. You strategize. All of these things can come in literally a fraction of the time you used to spend it in. Why is this the case? Now, out of the 5 dimensions of energy, I want you to recall that there is something called extraversion and introversion, which comes from the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator personality tool. Now, their theory is that if you are an extrovert, you seek re-energizing from the external world. So you go out, you go to crowded places, you go for walks in nature, and so on. Introversion is about going inside of yourself. You do reflection, art, you listen to music, you interpret movies, you have a conversation with yourself, journaling and stuff like that. So all of that will be going inside of yourself, right? And I've come to discover that the 5 dimensions of energy can literally transform the way you're working right now. So first cut, these 5 dimensions: the physical dimension, the emotional dimension, the psychological dimension, the social dimension, and the spiritual dimension. Let me define them in turn. So physical dimension, well, your physical health, your well-being. I haven't fallen ill drastically for the last 3 years. In fact, I don't even recall over the last 2 years that I had even as much as a sniffle. And one of the challenges for most people is that they go, I'll just go vaccinate myself. Well, I have a slightly more holistic view of health, and if there's an opportunity, I'll share this on the channel as well. But physical health, work out, eat the right food, study nutrition, and so on. Now, my physical health was never the initial generator of energy. Now it is. However, I get a lot more motivation from intellectual work, from psychological energy. So these psychological sources, such as studying, reading, watching YouTube videos, all of these turn my brain on to a point where I go, I could do that exercise. It's easy for me to follow that routine. Oh, I see how this works now. That's logical. And the moment that turns on the brain, all of a sudden I'm utilizing my strength to combat my weaknesses or my lack of preference in physical activity. So the psychological route is also very powerful. But what if you have an emotional route? Well, think about it this way. Sometimes we say, I just don't feel like doing this or that, isn't it? But what about thinking about ways where you could get yourself into that mood or that mode? For instance, I do know that there are some people who have to pump themselves up with music to emotionally revitalize them first before they can do a proper workout, right? And what about situations where you are getting your emotions out of the way? I know that works for me too. I sit down, I do a little bit of meditation, journaling, reflection, put all my thoughts into my diary, and then it becomes easier for me to get started on my daily workout. Or it could be the other way around. Once I've done my daily workout, there's this catharsis. I'm free to share whatever's on my mind and my heart. So think about it this way. Depending on which one you tend to go to, out of the 5, social is, of course, your interactions with other people. To revitalize, you call people out, you interact with them. Sometimes it's just banter. You have a lot of fun, and you find that that's really cool to recharge your energy. And for some others, it's intellectual discussions, which push you to the edge of what you thought you knew, right? And that could be a big turn on for your brain as well. Now, notice that both of them have got different kinds of emotional states, but they are the social way of recharging your emotional, possibly even your psychological and mental intellect. Finally, your purpose in life. If you wake up every day and you've got a strong purpose in life, which is spiritual in nature, this is also a very powerful way to justify the way by which you deal with your physique, deal with your emotions. Let's say you're really frightened about things. And let's say you read a spiritual text or you were immersed in a spiritual practice of meditation, and it dawned on you, every time I'm feeling down or out or frightened, it merely just causes me to become even worse the next day. So what can you do about it? You say to yourself, well, for the purpose of me becoming a holistically refined person, I have to give up this habit or I have to replace it with something else, something along those lines. Now, of all those 5, which is your weakest one and which is your strongest one? As I mentioned, my weakest one was physical energy. So what I did was I utilized my strongest one, which was mental energy, reading books, watching YouTube videos, in order to get ideas to get my physical done, right? For some people I know, they are very devout in their religion and they look for reasons to interact with people, the social side, which may be their lowest preference, but their spiritual calling is so high that it can be used as motivational fodder to make you go and improve your social interactions with other people. So spend some time today, sit down, reflect on these 5 dimensions of energy, ask yourself which one is your go-to preference and which is the other one which prevents you from actually showing your best level of energy. Now remember, if one is weak, it could potentially suck the life out of all the other energy sources. So don't get me wrong, it's not just about strengthening one battery, it's making sure that all 5 batteries produce a higher voltage overall so that you're driven, so that you are more electrified by life. So consider creative ways to synergize. Maybe your social and your spiritual are highest, your emotional is weakest. So now you're looking for mentors whom are aligned with your spiritual view of life to give you wisdom that calms your nerves, for example, right? These are creative ways that only can come about as a result of you reflecting. Well, if you'd like some individualized coaching on the 5 dimensions of energy, all you need to do is take a look at the link description below and reach out to us.
I decided to do an illustration so that you could see how the 5 dimensions of energy is actually a very, very powerful tool. So just starting off by taking a look at the 5 dimensions, you are going to start off doing some reflection, and I'm going to give you some examples of this in each of those 5 categories in terms of how you recuperate or what kinds of practices you have that regenerate energy from you from any of those 5 dimensions. For sleep, nutrition, and exercise, these are areas which fit into the physical dimension of growth. Where emotional energy is recuperated, it could be from journaling, it could be something more active like dancing, or more craft-oriented like music and sculpture. In the mental side of energy recuperation, it could be reading something that's mentally stimulating, a form of using meditation for mindful practice, such as that helps with your psychological well-being, and solving work problems that perhaps gives you a mental boost as well. Social is about friends, family, maybe even colleagues and business prospects. And finally, spiritual is about the purpose of your life. So consider what kinds of contributions you're making, how you're helping yourself to come to understand your own spiritual leanings, and perhaps even some aspects of meditation. Now, once you've got all of these items, you've got to ask yourself, based on the things that I've been doing so far, how much energy have I recuperated? If it's 0, that means it's non-existent. You're deficient in that area. But if it's giving you a 10 based on whatever you've written down, then that is going very well. Chances are you're somewhere in between. So once again, take a look at the 5 dimensions of energy and then chart it out this way through a spidergram. So you'll realize that in this particular individual's chart, he scores very highly on physical as well as social. and he doesn't score very highly in mental and emotional. So there are two reasons for this. The first reason is that he's just prone to these kinds of preferences. Physical and social activities are the kinds of things that gets him or her going. Whereas emotional and mental, it's not really that area that brings very much joy in the first place. However, we do know that a deficiency in one area can cause a collapse in almost all other areas. So the first thing you want to look at is the lowest area, which is the highest risk area, and ask yourself, is it because I don't have activities and I don't prefer them? In which case I haven't explored. Or is it because I'm doing things that should not be done? For example, am I ruminating? Am I putting too much pressure or stress on myself? Am I bashing myself up on the inside? If that's the case, then perhaps it's time to kind of like get rid of that habit, right? And there are many strategies to do this. Just go watch one of the videos in the channel. So here's the thing. You may not be good, or you may not even like reading or having any kind of intellectual stimulation, but you don't mind listening to friends who share some of this information with you, because social is a 9. So how about tapping into the social side and then using that as a means to improve your mental well-being and to also intellectually stimulate you? Likewise, if physical is a 10 and emotional is currently a 5, you might want to use some physical means that gets your emotions better in check. It could be some form of perhaps Tai Chi, perhaps some kind of different physical routine, Zumba perhaps, which could actually include the social element together with it. So what I'm saying is that you can use those that you're already in preference to help to boost the energy that you get from activities in other dimensions as well. So I hope this has been helpful and it has given you some insight in terms of how you can start thinking about energy and how you can start recuperating it. So go ahead, do the exercise, and let me know in the comments down below if you got any questions that I need to answer. So, did you learn anything from that video? If you did, just give it a thumbs up and then click on the subscribe button and hit the notifications icon so that you and I will continue to stay in touch and I can provide you with updates whenever we have new videos.